Good morning and welcome to my channel. I'm Dr. Carmen McGuinness. I post weekly Sunday segments on relationships of all sorts, including the relationship we have with ourselves, what I call the primary relationship. Today my topic is trust. Learning to trust yourself again after trauma can be very difficult. Trusting yourself is the first step. Today we're going to talk about learning to trust yourself. The degree to which we trust in ourselves is derived directly from the management of our mistakes while we're growing up. If our parents were harsh and unforgiving when we erred, or sarcastic, making fun of us perhaps, or even embarrassing us, we likely learned to fear that we'll err in adulthood. We learned to mistrust ourselves and to dread the consequences of our mistakes. Or if the consequences were harsh enough, we might have learned to lie and cover up in order to avoid them. The greatest risk in this, far greater than the mistake going undetected, is that we might learn to lie to ourselves about our errors, to avoid them. Avoidance of consequences, or avoidance of any sort really, often leads to psychological avoidance. Now, if our parents were emotionally unavailable, not minding or perhaps noticing even that we'd made mistakes, not helping to correct them, we might have learned to do the same, to ignore our own mistakes, pretend they didn't happen. Even big ones. Mistakes like maybe, say, getting a speeding ticket, one of those pricey speeding tickets, and lying to your parents about it, or to your spouse. In the emotionally unavailable contingency, we might have learned that we're entitled to mistakes. And eventually, we might have learned that we're entitled to lie about our mistakes as well. And in fact, just entitled in general. For the first type, those who became afraid of their own mistakes, the risk for them is that their errors begin to act as self-fulfilling prophecies. See, I did it again. I made another mistake. Every one of their errors confirming that they will once more screw up. For the second type, those who would rather lie than face their own mistakes, they soon learn that the lessons that they learn, instead of learning the lessons, they learn how to avoid them. That's what they become really good at. And the lessons just pass them by. They run out of them like tea in a broken cup. Now, you might have made a connection here. You might be thinking that the first type of person I'm talking about is the codependent, the empath type, while the second type tend toward narcissism, and you'd probably be correct about that. But of course, there are always exceptions, and there's crossover between these two types. Sadly, however, both of these types share one commonality. Both lack one thing, and that is trust. The first group doesn't trust others to accept them, despite their mistakes, and the second type doesn't trust themselves not to make mistakes. However, when we dig a little deeper, we learn that neither type trusts anyone, not themselves and not others. Think about it. If you don't trust yourself not to make mistakes, then that necessarily means you can't trust anyone else either, because you're the decider of who to trust. And there's a plane going over. I don't know if you can hear it. It's quite early in the morning here. I have a brunch date, so I started a little earlier than usual. So if you can't make judgments, you can't determine whether someone is suitable as a friend, a business associate, an employer, employee, or a lover. So how can you trust anyone if you can't make that determination? And if someone doesn't trust his parents or his wife or husband to admit that they'd received a speeding ticket, he probably doesn't trust that he's a good enough person, a worthy enough person to be forgiven for his mistake, to learn from his mistake, and to be trusted not to repeat it. Now, I'm not going to go into how to recover from codependency or narcissism here, though I will put up links to several videos that I've recorded about this. There's several segments on this channel about those topics. So I'll put up links for that. Some of you viewing this might already suspect where I'm going next, because the next thing I'm going to do is to talk about how to learn to trust yourself. And if, in fact, what I said is true, that we learn that from how our parents respond to our mistakes, then you're going to guess what the next part is. I'm going to ask you to parent yourself a little bit. I'm going to ask you to do that self-care piece that all therapists like people to do, to take care of yourself and begin to be your own parent a little bit. Now, I'm not saying this is a simple process. I don't mean to make it sound simple or silly or light. In fact, it turns out that this is very difficult stuff. So what are these magic ingredients that others are good at, that others manage to learn from their amazing parents that I still struggle with? What are they? How exactly do we parent ourselves to learn to be better at trusting ourselves? Well, it really comes down to just 3 little words. You might want to write these down if you need to freeze the video and go get a piece of paper and pencil or pen. You can write these words all over your house. You can put up little memos for yourself. And they are compassion, forgiveness, and encouragement. So let's start at the top. What is compassion? Well, for me, compassion is the hardest one of all of these. It's very, very difficult to me to make a mistake and be compassionate with myself. I'm absolutely top-notch at doing this for other people. I'm your best friend if you make a mistake. I'll even help you mop up the mess. But I'm really, really, really hard on myself. So what exactly is compassion? Well, it's essentially that emotion that we experience when we don't wish to see a person suffer. And self-compassion is what we feel when we don't want to see ourselves suffer. You'd think that would be easy, right? Nope. Turns out it's really hard for those of us who have trust issues. And as I said, the codependent type tend to be hard on themselves, while the narcissistic type tend to ignore their own problems. So the codependent type place the highest of expectations on themselves. They beat themselves up over things. And the narcissistic type avoid the whole matter by lying and pretending, lying even to themselves, pretending that nothing happened, nothing went wrong. They didn't do anything wrong. I don't know what you're talking about. But beneath that act, beneath that narcissistic avoidance, is actually a layer of self-loathing where self-compassion should reside. So next, on our 3 little words, is forgiveness. This one is also really hard for me, unless it's somebody else's mistake and I'm helping you mop it up while I'm forgiving you. But when it's me, excuse me, it's harder. It gets easier to forgive yourself and others when you see the benefits of it. Forgiveness really, 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 really is cathartic. You just let go of all that bad energy. Poof, it's gone, it disappears. When you think about it, what's the alternative? What's the opposite of forgiveness? Holding a grudge? Imagine what the word grudge would look like if it had form, if it had a face. Think about grudge. Ugh. Ugly, right? Who wants to hold on to that? I don't. And last, but certainly not least in our list of 3 little words, is encouragement. And this is where the lessons come in. How do you prevent the bad stuff about a mistake from recurring? You learn the lesson, and you do better next time. just like a good parent would. You talk to yourself about the contingencies. Next time, if you see that guy take off his ring and slip it into his pocket when you approach, chances are he's married. I'm sorry, I apologize. That was some bad early morning humor. A big part of self-trust is trusting your senses, including your intuition, and with encouragement, not discouragement. And once you've got the lessons, once you've wrapped them up like a little gift to yourself, what you need to learn, like a little present, you can just kind of let it go, send it off into the universe. Absolutely no ruminating, no self-recrimination, no doubt about whether you read it wrong, missed something. Just let it go. One of the reasons we ruminate is that we haven't learned the lesson, usually because we're blocking pain and suffering. It's that psychological avoidance thing I was talking about. But think about it. If you have a loving parent, yourself in this case, at home to nurture you through the discomfort of a really bad emotional wound, it will pass. And if that parent offers encouragement, you will have learned the lessons. Once you begin to trust yourself again, or perhaps for the first time, you'll find yourself trusting others as well, because that's what naturally follows. Why? Because you trust yourself to select them among all the possible people that you might try to trust. Not everyone deserves your trust. That's part of what you'll learn. But you'll trust yourself to choose who does. So I thank you very much for viewing this morning. I hope you have a very amazing Sunday, and I will see you soon.